Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today I'm going to be talking about how change takes guts. Before I jump into the conversation, I want to tell you just a little bit about myself. I'm from Evergreen, Colorado, and I go to Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia, but I'm spending this summer in Washington, D.C. as an intern. That's enough about me for now, because I have a story I want to share. Today is June 1st, which marks the 7th night of protests following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. If you need more context than that, I suggest you pause this real quick and give it a quick Google, because I think you need a little current events update. DC has been an exciting place to be for these past couple days, but I've been feeling like I haven't put myself out into the protests in the way that I feel I should. However, this afternoon, I went to the protests at the Capitol building and was excited to be participating in a peaceful protest at one of the most important and historic buildings in the country. Unfortunately, the protest was short-lived because while the protesters were being 100% perfectly peaceful and were merely exercising their First Amendment rights, the large military-grade vehicles carrying the DC National Guard soon came rolling through the streets to box in the crowd of protesters. People immediately began to scatter, and the crowds began to move toward the White House for the night's protests. Seeing the huge tank-looking trucks packed full with men in camo uniforms with their riot gear definitely scared me, and I called my dad to tell him about the scene. My dad asked me to send pictures, asked if I was okay, and then asked if I had thought about sharing my experience with my college community. He brought up the fact that I am, of course, in the nation's capital during one of the most influential summers in history, and people would be interested to hear my take on the events. In a nutshell, I pretty much said, yeah, I'll talk to you later, and proceeded on my walk to the nearest store to get my much-needed and well-deserved kombucha for all of my wonderful protesting efforts. Please note the sarcasm in my tone. However, suddenly I realized, wait, what the hell am I doing? I claim that I support the civil rights movement, and I claim that I want to be a journalist. But here I am turning my back on this amazing, important event that people need and want to hear. To do what? Go to Whole Foods? For kombucha before heading home to watch TV? No, absolutely not. I couldn't walk away from this. So, at 5:45, with the city's curfew set at 7 p.m., and my phone on 7%, sorry Mom and Dad, I started speed walking back across the city toward the White House, where another night's protest would be taking place. As I started nearing the White House, I began to hear the familiar chants of "Say his name, George Floyd," and "Hands up, don't shoot," and "No justice, no peace." Here are some clips of the protest I managed to record before my phone died, at just about 6 p.m. Not too smart, I know, and again, sorry Mom and Dad.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Black lives matter! 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 Black lives matter!
I fell into the crowd of protesters and became engrossed by reading people's signs and chanting along with the crowd. I had only been to one major protest before in my life, and that was the Women's March in Denver last spring, which was amazing, but the scene was so much different. While the Women's March was filled with love, happiness, and lots of pink hats, these protests were motivated by anger and desperation to make a change. The passion of the crowd was unlike anything I had ever felt or experienced before in my life, and I felt it too. I felt like what we were doing was important and that we may be making a real difference. While there were chants like 12 and booing at the guards outside the White House, the protest was again completely peaceful, and everyone there was respecting DC's laws. I managed to catch a glimpse of someone's watch and at about 6:20, which was well before curfew, the National Guard began making announcements and asking the crowd to disperse. After about 10 minutes more, I started to hear screams and saw that people were running away from the White House barricades. My eyes started to burn, and then they started to water as I ran with the crowd. Then I started to cough, and the only thing I thought about was just keep moving and don't trip. Just keep moving and don't trip. As I continued to panic walk/run with the crowd, I could hear loud bangs and turned around to see the clouds of tear gas. As I stood farther down the street, watching the gas and hearing the bangs and the screams, a man next to me said, "Do you see that? That right there? That's your American freedom." As I booked it back toward my apartment, I let those words resonate. And I truly don't think I will ever forget the moment of standing there, looking at the tear gas clouds, seeing officers on horseback, and hearing the screams of protesters with this random guy who perfectly summarized the serious need for some guts and some change in this country. While I left the protest, I know that there were hundreds of brave people who endured the pain and stayed behind to fight for their beliefs, and I absolutely commend their efforts. I learned tonight that change really takes guts, and those people out there protesting had the guts to put their lives on the line for the cause they believe in. They were white, black, and brown, men, women, and even some children, standing together to fight against injustice. For me, the perfect cherry on top of this crazy day was coming back to see the CNN headline on my laptop that all of the tear gas and the rubber bullets had been used on, again, completely peaceful protesters about half an hour from curfew, just so President Trump could head across the street to St. John's Episcopal Church, where he waved around a Bible and gushed that we're the greatest country in the world. And if you couldn't hear it in my voice, there were some serious air quotes around that. While telling this story was a great reflection for me, I want to use this platform to commend everyone who is standing up for what they believe in, and everyone who has the guts to fight for what's right. To all of the people on the front lines of the protests, risking their lives, thank you for standing up for what's right. To all of the people who are attending the protests and standing in solidarity with others, thank you for standing up for what's right. And to those who are donating to nonprofits and posting on social media to raise awareness about social injustice, thank you for standing up for what's right. Thank you guys so much for listening to this little rant of mine, and if you liked this episode or want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lilymott00@gmail.com or on Instagram at lilymott3. Tune in for our next episode, which will hopefully, fingers crossed, feature an interview with a very special guest. But until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.